help out. So anyways, I'm Brandon Donnelson. I'm from Sencha, and I work just north of Arlington, Washington, or just in Arlington, Washington, which is north of Seattle on the west coast of the United States. So I'm a Sencha GXT engineer, support engineer actually. So I help developers get the job done. So I've been working with Git quite a long time. I don't usually like to discuss the years because it kind of makes me feel old in a way. You know, every time I talk about years, you know, it's like mentioning my age. I enjoy working with structured Git apps and getting and building applications with structured Git apps. So my main passion is trying to help make developers' jobs easier. So I do a little bit of side development with the Git Eclipse plugin. I don't know if you've noticed in the Google Plus community, I try to post there sometimes with improvements or progress or things that are being done in that realm. So my wife and I have 5 kids, a little bit about me. We go to a lot of sporting events, a lot of events. So we also have 1 llama, 2 alpaca, 4 goats. My manager makes fun of me because she goes, "How many goats do you have?" I think 4 or 5. What do you mean you don't know how many goats do you have? So then she goes, "Well, how many kids do you have?" And I go, "I think 5. You go. So anyway, we have our llama's our guard dog, and here she is, you know, smiling. My wife got this picture, and so she uses Git too. So yeah. At any rate, so what is GXT? GXT, we provide Git components for building your application. So it's like building a house. You want to take your application and build it, so you got to find components to get the job done. And you go shopping at the hardware store to find the components to get the job done. And we provide the pretty kitchen cabinets, the fixtures that go on the cabinets, and the flooring, and the bathroom fixtures, and the lighting fixtures, things that look nice. And you can pick all the Sencha components to do the job. And you don't have to only pick Sencha. You can actually interop with other libraries and bring them in and build a nice enterprise or nice consumer application. So if you don't get a chance to see the full suite of our products or all their components, we spent a lot of man-years in building grids and locking grids and pivot grid and data-rich components, calendars, and charts. Daniel, back there at the sales table, he can show you the suite of products and widgets. I won't show them here, a little internet. Well, I may get time at the end, and we'll see if we can get there. But if I don't get a chance, stop by and ask, and we can show you all the little pretty widgets we have. So 3 goals I'm going to cover: provide an overview of the GXT engine, kind of see behind the scenes the gears that make things work for us internally, and to provide a glimpse of the GXT responsive layouts. How can we lay out or make layouts easier to build with Java construction? And provide an intro into the component options. And some of that will be, you have to pull up online because the internet's a little bit slow for me. So GXT5 is a rewrite and build up from scratch, because we're looking at the new Git architecture and with Jackal and the new compiler. So we have a bolder plan. GXT5 is a bold new release designed from the ground up to usher in a future of web development with Java. And so we're looking at how we can make it easier, get the job more productive and easier to write widgets and build application, because there's a lot of consumers that we have. We might be a consultant, we might be in enterprise, we might be a startup looking to build those applications and how we get the job done. So we're focusing on the future and trying to get an evergreen browser. So we're aiming to be one of an optimal Java solution to make it easier to write JavaScript with Java. So bold ideas for the experience. Java has, we've taken some of our learning ideas from the other frameworks and try to take the best out of them. We try to leave the garbage behind, of course. Not that there is, because Java is one of the nicer pieces on writing JavaScript. So we've used scene graphs and clear separation of concerns to try to make the model easier for us internally as engineers to be able to separate the concerns, to make the code abstractable or readable, and to be able to create a maintenance cycle that is a lot easier, because as we come from IE8, IE9, and be able to serve those platforms, we had an ideal system, but our ideal system has baggage for the newer browsers. So when we're looking at Edge, Safari, and Firefox, and Chrome, and all available API features that we have today, we have to look at taking advantage of those. So we're looking at a better system. So we have what we call observable properties and observable collections. So anything we update or set, the behavior is known without the components. So each component acts like a mini application. So we're looking at better design because we have responsive design, mobile widgets, and material design, and then a radically new theming system. GXT4 we came through was a little bit more painful because we're trying to fit the model of trying to emulate rounded corners in the older browsers, and we had to do that with images. So that 9-box button, we had to take all the images and slice them up and get in there. But yet we could use CSS3 in the newer, so we use an appearance model to replace the pretty pattern that goes in behind the scenes. And then we have the Flexbox layout, which is, I'll talk a little bit more about that. It's responsive, and responsive depending on the resolution that you have on your screen or device. And we also use we have a 12 by 12 grid system, so it uses all the available space. Sometimes you want your documents to flow, sometimes you want to lay them out programmatically, but you don't want to necessarily do that with JavaScript. You want to push that to the browser. You want to use CSS to say, browser, use all the available space across the screen without having to think about width and height, but yet the content size. So here we have forms with different perspective or different resolutions. So as you grow in and shrink, the flex, the layout changes according to the media resolution. So we have better, what I would think is better theming. When we use CSS3, which allows the browser to be optimized because the browser is taking control of the theming and sizes. So we took one step further. GWT had GSS, but we looked at in the newer system with APT or annotation processors, we could actually use the native Google Closure style sheets instead of the GWT baked in GSS, which allows us a little bit more. And then we, of course, added a few functions to serve images and whatnot. And so you don't need any special tools to get the job done. And so we don't use the widget stack or GWT user in our GXT5 framework. In that case, once we move to the newer compiler, we don't have to carry along GWT user, which means we can leave that baggage behind. And we can, of course, mix and match themes. We don't have to worry about how hard it is to switch theming. We're just basically switching CSS style sheets. And it's fully customizable, whether it be inline or adding in GSS or basically CSS to either a widget or component. And so we have better technologies. What I really like is the Java 8 and the syntax or semantics that you can use to write interop and incremental, and then it boils down to incremental compilations to build the application. And you can build faster. By the way, if you're, I'm going to give a little plug for the GWT Eclipse plugin. I have a talk tomorrow on the GWT Eclipse plugin, but I know there's some IntelliJ users, and that's great. I love the IntelliJ platform as well. But I want to support the free Eclipse plugin and try to help bring that technology or improve that so it makes development the life cycle and refresh. But I'll talk about pieces of or different angles of how you can compile or how you can use Super Dev mode or GWT development mode in different ways to deploy or debug your app. So back to makes extension. So we use extensive or Java 8 extensively in GXT5, and of course that's lambdas, method references, streams, and functional interfaces. And this gives us better performance because we're using the bare bones, the model. We're not carrying around the baggage of the previous versions of. So we've gone to the metal and covered that already. So CSS3 is one of the pieces that helps us optimize browser performance because we're actually using class names with selectors, and that means when you deploy that the browser renders, the browser can take care of the optimizations, and we don't have to really think about that. We're thinking about how can we provide the components in a rich nature and be able to provide that to our end users. And we use HTML5 to get that job done. And we've built a foundation, basic niceties to be able to call the DOM, similar to Elemental 2, but we decided to speed up the process and actually do the same thing in our framework. So we have stronger ideas about how we build GXT into a more flexible and event where we use small MVC architecture, where the appearance and the model and the state are controlled with a nice collections or properties that can have events. So if you set something, the widget will know, and it's easy to control the state or behavior of it. So no matter what you do, what you want to do is customizable. Let's see, everything is observable. I covered that. Unified custom events and extensible gestures. So the event system, we didn't have quick users, so we had to actually build up. So we don't have the on-browser loop, event loop to plug into, so we actually reinvented the event system, which is basically not too much, it's quite nice. So touch pointers and mouse, who cares? We boil down the abstraction of the event so you can listen to any of the events, or just basically say, I just want to listen to an input action, whether it be a touch, a selection, a trigger, a mouse click, or some other device that actually interacts with the browser. So hierarchy events, we have mouse event any or input event any. So you can boil it down to what you particularly want to listen to. How am I doing it? So we have gesture recognizers as well as pinch and zoom. We can build that in, and of course you can hook that in onto your components, so you can take care of all the focus and come out of the larger perspective of the resolution and bend under or pinch on your device. And so next I'm going to cover a little bit about the layout challenges. Layout is one of there's two things that I get questions a lot on. One is layout, and two is theming. And in general, there's some other things, but those two things hang up and burn a lot of time with developers. So the challenges with layout, it's hard to fake responsive layout in our earlier versions. In our earlier versions, we had programmatic layout, where we say JavaScript, and those containers at the root send down the sizing to the children. And that is ripe for edge cases. So GXT4 relies heavily on programmatic sizing, which means the browser doesn't really optimize it. And if you look at the timeline, you get lots of JavaScript calls in the stack, and the frames get a lot longer. And so in the browser, if you get a real heavy DOM and lots of widgets and data-rich content on the page, your DOM will actually take longer to render. So it's extremely difficult to make it responsive. And nested debugging, or when you're debugging layouts and it's very nested, sometimes it's challenging. It could be simpler, and we saw that. So monolithic sets of programmatic, and so that creates upsets, and there's so many edge cases that bend around that, and you get frustrated. So in the docs, and it's a confusing story, and some flow, some programmatic, some pain. What do you do about making that easier? And then we have so many containers. Now we have lots of containers that suit specific purposes, but we've built containers much more optimized for, I'll talk about that in a minute. So flow or not to flow. So we start ripping out our hair going, how can we make layouts easier? So we mix flow sizing with programmatic sizing, and spending hours, which should take minutes or moments, to say I'm going to lay out with different resolutions. So it works in some and not others. And of course, our grid has a little bit of challenge. So one of the things is zooming, and zooming, there's no event for zooming. So when you zoom in, you want the browser to be doing the layout, because if you zoom in, you want it to lay out the components, so reflow the components as zoom takes it. So too many resolutions to account for, and so you go, make it stop, make it stop. So then we have what we call real responsive layout. So according to MDN, the defining aspect of the flex layout is the ability to alter its items width and or height to the best fill available space on the display or device. So if you look at when you shrink shrink your window, will your content display really nicely? And will it stack, or will a stack look like a gallery? Will it stretch or use? So, and then could we use one source to rule them all? So are we writing a layout for mobile? Are we writing a layout for every device or form factor? Instead, we could use something different. You won't need a separate phone, tablet, or desktop UI. One UI to view all the device, and it's simpler basically to write one layout. You don't have to do that. I'm not saying this is just an option to layout. But there's more than one road, of course. You've probably seen different ways to use media queries to set your layouts. And you could use block modes or floating. But we have a new layout called Flexbox. Now, there's some attributes that are not supported in older browsers, but the newer browsers, you can use the Flex layout as an ultimate choice of what I call a CSS simplicity, because you don't have to think about the width, height. You're thinking about what the available layout or available space that you have to lay out the content of the widget or component. So it's easy to center, baseline, or start aligning. And one of the fantastic things about Flexbox is if you set an RTL or LTR, all the flex direction will reverse automatically without having to think about it. So we have what I call the holy grail, because if you look at the right or left there for your left, we could have our desktop layout, and then on the right, as we go to a mobile layout or a smaller resolution, it can stack differently. And it's easy to set the order of the stack by just saying order basically equals 1 or 2 or 3 in the CSS class. So then we have desktop and mobile all in one. We can say it's awesome just to do a desktop, or it's awesome to do both. And this is kind of how you feel. Is it too good to be true? Is the other thought that occurs. But once you play around with the Flexbox layout, it's kind of fascinating how easy it is to not have to think about width or height. So GXT5 makes it quite simple to use Java construction to build the responsive layout. So we use CSS resizing and browser, so this allows the browser to be quite optimized for performance. And native scrolling for animations, and scrolling works quite nicely with Flex. And so what we have is a 12-column responsive grid layout, which is CSS3 based, and and it's like the Bootstrap or Material Design Responsive Grid. And we used it to build it into the GXT Foundation. And the goal of this is to make writing more intuitive, make HTML more intuitive, and eliminate edge cases on when you do build layouts. And use merely one container. You don't have to use one container. It's just an option. So, and it's simpler to nest structures in these type of flex layouts, because you can nest flex or flexbox, and then each container takes the available size depending on how you flex it. And it takes basically, once you familiarize yourself with attributes that you can select or the behaviors of flex, it's quite easy to change it. And you don't necessarily need to use GXT to get the job done, because it's available in HTML. But we just allow a Java construction to do the job. So it's simplified construction, simplified rendering, and simplified debugging. And so here's an example that's coming up. This is our 12 columns per row. If you look at the 12 small boxes, it's divided into 12 available. So I put 12 boxes on there, and they're divided up into 12. And then if you look at the next row, it's divided up into 4. My math is a little bit so anyways, you can see the different. So if we take 1 to 6, that's half. So responsive, adapting the size to the display or available space. One view, same content, less code. And here's an example of the media. So I set my content in there, and I give it responsive styles, and depending on the media size, it will change the layout. And as you watch the size, the shrink, you'll see the media sizes change. This might be hard to see with the gray. I'll go one more time. So as it shrinks there, you can see our examples too are also flexing, and the layout changes depending on the size, and eventually it all stacks. So then we look at Java construction. So we add a component, responsive styles, and responsive view. So here we have the responsive column. It might be harder to see. We'll have to look at it in the slides later, or you can ask me. But if we have the responsive column, takes a component and a responsive style and a responsive row. And then we have column sizes. Basically, we have the extra small. Maybe let's call the extra small query maybe a watch, just for simplicity. And the small, let's say that means that media query is based on a phone. And then media may be a little bigger phone. And then we have large tablet and extra large desktop. I don't remember the media queries for each one, how many pixels wide, but you can say media responsive style for this size, I want to take up to 12 rows. So it could take, I want to take 3 rows, 2 rows, 12 rows, depending on the size of the resolution. And then it looks like this in Java. So basically that's saying responsive column, I take a widget, and then here's my responsive style. And then how many, in that responsive style underscore, how many columns should I take up? And then we have offsets, which is basically saying offset how many rows for that particular media resolution. And you can see we have all 4 of those offsets. And then we have the responsive column, and you can do multiples. You can do offset plus how much space should I take up. And you can do different combinations of multimedia queries. And to say, I want 6 row, a combination, I want on a phone, I want all 12 rows. On a tablet, I want 6 rows. On a desktop, I only need 3, depending on the resolution. And you can do multiples of that, so the content is different per device. And so here you can see we have an offset of 4 columns, and then of course the progress spans 2, and then it looks like 6 for the progress bar. And so here we go, we look at a multiple response styles in the works. As you can see, that changes the layout as it shrinks, depending on how those responsive styles were stated in the Java. And I'm a little bit slow here. I could have did a little bit faster. You can see it all stacks right there. So if it was on a phone, you can set create a stack. And then as it gets bigger, goes to the tablet, it takes up all 12 rows. And then as you get to the bigger device, you'll see it offset 3 rows. So we haven't hit the bigger device, but the examples did. And you'll see the offset come up. Here we go, almost there. There's the offset of 4. So here we go. The last thing that we have, one of the cool things that Daniel was talking about, is JS Interop. And what do we do with JS Interop in our house? We can get more out of. We have pivot grids, charts, and grids with our EXTJS framework, and quite a bit. We have another, what I heard, a calendar widget, and the EXTJS is basically a JavaScript framework that we offer, which is basically like saying I want to use Google Maps and generate for that. But we have a pivot grid, trees and grids, and split grids. So we're looking at offering a generate a library from our EXTJS. So we have customers that are quite large that use both JavaScript and Java. So depending on what type of writing you like to do, you could use Java, or if you like, you could use JavaScript. Of course, I'll say you go ahead and use Java because I'm the Java guy, but that's not for everybody. But we allow to interop with that library, and so we have ARIA support and other things that are pretty cool. And you can ask Danny to show you all the widgets that are available. And so we can use this wrapper to get us more buying power to build pretty compelling applications for our enterprise. So here's an example of the pivot grid. one of the widgets, and you can expand and do all kinds of fancy stuff in there. And the locking grid, or what I like to call it, is the split grid, where you can actually scroll in the second half there. And you can customize that, of course. And we have charts. And here's an example of a bubble chart, bar chart, and an infographic. And we've got quite the chart library, and we've got dedicated staff just to do the mathematics for the charts. So Java EXT.js construction, GXT uses the same terminology as GXT, so it's quite easy to interop with it and be familiar with it. But maybe you're not familiar with how to write JS interop, but that's getting easier because we have the JS generator that can build that. And it's easy to write JavaScript with GWT 2.8 using JS interop. It's quite fantastic. It takes a little bit of effort to understand the namespace in the annotation and to understand how to do native and do a function. But once you do it, it feels quite nice. So writing JavaScript with Java is quite awesome in my opinion. And so here's an example of some JS interop, basically to show the type construction and how to do configs with our component. It's just a quick flyover. If you do have questions, I'll be in the back and I can show you a little more detailed example. So if you need help, we also have professional support, and you can get help fast. I help you with GWT or GXT or anything in that nature. And one of the things I do like to help with is showing how folks can get more or better debugging life cycles out of super dev mode. How can you debug faster with super dev mode in complicated environments where you have lots of services, VMs, and different web structures? There's different strategies that you can use that you can get better. And some of those I'll cover in the GWT Eclipse talk, and I'll show a little bit more about that. And so I like to help you get the job done, or Ascension does. So we do have an EA. If you're interested, you can take that. And then if you want more, we have some places that you can follow. I do roam on Gitter a little bit. I can't stay there all day, but I can help answer questions. And then, of course, you can find me on Twitter, or LinkedIn, or the Google Plus or GWT community as well. All right. Thank you.